started looking at personalised care for the armed forces community at the end of 2019, mainly because across the southwest we have a high percentage of armed forces community, both in terms of veterans, serving personnel, but also families and children of those that are serving or have served. And what we really wanted to do was work in a collaborative way across the region to look at how personalised care could support that community, with a real clear understanding that actually the way you work with the armed forces community needs to be slightly different, and there needs to be a slightly different skill set and understanding of working in that way. And we really felt that social prescribing could be the way to do that. So we established a collaborative approach at the beginning of 2020, working with various different organisations, military charities, different health professionals across the whole of the southwest. And at the time, we then also came into contact with some people in Northumbria who were also doing something similar around social prescribing for the armed forces community. So a partnership was developed, and it's been a really good collaborative, integrated approach to looking at personalised care, with social prescribing being the front door to the whole model of personalised care. And what we've now got is dedicated social prescribing link workers for the armed forces community, which we hope to grow over the next couple of years.
I'm a former Royal Marine. I served in the Royal Marines for just under 10 years, straight out of school. Deployed to Iraq in 2003 when I was 19 on something called Operation Telic 1, which went well from my perspective. I came back unscathed and carried on my career. And then a couple of years later, in 2007, when we were really in the thick of it in Afghanistan, I got the call up to go out and do a 6-month tour on something called Operation Herrick 7. Halfway through that tour, on Christmas Eve that year, I was out on a routine foot patrol, and on the way back into our camp, we were given cover for another section. And as I went to get into a fire position, I knelt on and detonated an improvised explosive device, which eventually resulted in me losing both my legs above the knee and my right arm above the elbow. I think the key thing, if you want to personalise veterans care, is to include the veteran in the whole process from the beginning. I don't know, if you hold focus groups or that kind of stuff, but get the feedback from the veterans. And also, as well as that, all the veterans organisations that are available, because there could be someone out there who needs help with a specific issue but has no idea what will work for them because they don't know what's available. So when you go to these charities like Blesma and the British Legion, all these guys who run skiing holidays or equine therapy or music therapy or anything like that, there could be somebody looking for that but doesn't know that it exists, or maybe just wants to try it but has never had the opportunity because they don't know where to go and who to speak to. So, getting the veterans involved is key, asking us what we need, and then linking them in with the organisations that can provide it or give them a better idea of what it is that's available so they can test certain things and see what works for them.
The idea of having dedicated social prescribers for the armed forces veteran community is absolutely fantastic, and I fully welcome it. The veteran community is a vulnerable group, we know that. To be fair, the vast majority of our military veterans leave the military, reintegrate into society, no problems whatsoever, but there are some who do have specific needs. It tends to be, as a rule, mental health, hearing and musculoskeletal things, injuries that they picked up. And when they do have a problem like that, they do need a special level of input. And the NHS and social care need to be aware of that and recognise that. If you're a veteran, it can be quite daunting to engage with mainstream health and social care. But because our veterans social prescribers are all ex-military themselves, they've immediately got that bond and that rapport. And there's a trust established very early on, which is vital. And certainly, so I'm a Army reservist myself of 30+ years service, and I get that. So when I see veterans coming to me, we can understand the language and we've got things in common. I'm Army, but if they're Navy, that doesn't matter. That's friendly banter. But there's something about the forces community that when you've got someone who is struggling, and it is sometimes these can be hard issues to raise, difficult issues, personal issues to raise. But if you've got someone who you've got something in common with, and the veterans do that, there is that sort of that brotherhood. It can be an obstacle to engage, but if you've got someone who's on the same wavelength, it gets you over there and gets that first step and on the road to supporting someone in that sort of holistic sense that sometimes veterans need.
As a veteran and someone that's worked in social prescribing for a number of years, the social prescribing element and personal care is extremely important for the veterans community, just to emphasise that they are valued and they have someone to come to that has a background that they can relate to. They feel that they have a say in where they want the referral to be, so they're knowledgeable about what I'm able to give them, because I can explain it from their perspective as well as our perspective as a social prescriber for the armed forces community, but also that they're comfortable with what we're asking them to do. Sometimes the veterans community is seen as quite insular because of whatever reason, but we're here to break down those barriers and really use this personalised care as something that they can buy into and feel that, yes, this is something that I'm not going to try again and then go to someone else and go to someone else. I've got someone here from the armed forces community that knows what they're saying, knows what I want, and hopefully we can marry up the two. The armed forces community is one that is quite knowledgeable in their experience and what's their experience through their military life and being still serving or approaching retirement or being a veteran. So yes, the armed forces community is extremely knowledgeable, but working with them and working with the community in general, we can give them the balanced view of actually this is available and is really good, as well as the knowledge that they can have by a referral to a military charity or getting the help through specialised treatment being Op Courage with the NHS. So we've got that for them, but we can also give them an objective, balanced opinion of what's out there in general in the community from all aspects. People, when you say the word veteran, they see it as someone 60, 70, 80 years old. But actually, a veteran is someone that served one day in the armed forces. So the younger element out there that have served and done many tours are really where we want to get the word out and get them acknowledged as a veteran and for them to acknowledge themselves as veterans. And part of doing that is becoming a veteran-friendly practice, working alongside those practices, so the younger element can feel that, yes, I'm a veteran, I can go and get the help if I require it.
I think when engaging with veterans particularly, a common theme that's come across centres around their preference to speak to someone who understands what it means to have served. They also don't want to repeat their story, so it's really important that we work with colleagues across our integrated care system to be able to share information appropriately and safely in order to best support the individual. Although I left the army about 8 years ago, I've always wanted to give something back. I think you never really leave once you've served, particularly if you've had the privilege to hold positions of command at any level. There is an inherent sense of belonging to this community, and while some individuals' needs are greater than others, this can fluctuate with pressures or life events. But in the role I'm in, I'm very lucky to be in a position where I get to work with some incredible people, driven by passion and a sense of duty to support our serving community, both regular and reserve, our veterans, and of course, the families who all go through this with us. So I would like to see supporting the armed forces community become more mainstream, rather than seen as something that's done in addition.
For the future, I'd like to see more veterans as they leave the service and veterans who've already left make sure that their doctors are aware that they have served the country. Personally, for myself, it helps us to engage with them, and it also helps them to get them in the right place.
Veterans often feel that they can overcome the issues themselves. This is due to their training and the core ethos instilled with them, such as commitment and bravery. What we'd like to do is try and give them the tools necessary and the referrals and the resources so that they can deal with these problems themselves. This then gives them a belief and more impetus to overcome those issues. The Armed Forces community actually have access to support services that aren't readily available to the general population, such as funding, experiences and specialist mental health support. Having someone like the Armed Forces Community Social Prescriber there that knows these services and can make the referrals will not just relieve the stress for the Armed Forces community but the wider social prescribing community as well. My hope for the future of this role would be to try and get as many GP practices as possible veteran friendly accredited. I mean, in Cornwall alone, the recent statistic is about 28% of the population are actually veterans. Added to that, their families, and you're talking possibly half of the population within Cornwall. Currently, there's only 12 practices out of plus 100 that are registered. If we can just get those veterans to come forward, get the GP surgeries to become veteran-friendly accredited, and these veterans can get SNOMED codes, then we can recognise where they are, and that means we can send future funding to these places and use it in a better way where it can be used to overcome issues. Our roles have not just been about working with the social prescribers, but also about working with the third sector, the charities within Cornwall, to try and bring them together and work more collaboratively, really, and to try and do what's best for the Armed Forces community rather than perhaps just numbers and figures. This way we can get everyone singing off the same hymn sheet and doing what's best for the veteran.
If I wasn't fortunate enough to have the opportunity to personalise my care, and I think about this a lot, I wouldn't be who I am now and I wouldn't be able to do the things I do now. So I have a full-time job, 40 hours a week, sometimes more, working full-time, which I'm very grateful for and fortunate to have. I have 3 children. I do school runs. I still work out and train. I keep fit and healthy. I have multiple projects on the go, personal stuff, that I enjoy doing. I've got hobbies and all that kind of stuff, because this is as easy as it possibly can be for me now, because we've been through the process of tweaking, personalising and giving me the components and everything that I need to make my life easier. I haven't used a wheelchair now since the 9th of June 2009. That wouldn't be possible if I had to do everything by the book and I was told what I need to use and what works for me, because I remember how difficult it was, how painful it was, how angry I was, because everything was 10 times harder than it is now and than it needed to be. So personalising my care for me basically gave me my life back. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but it did. And that's why I can go out now and live independently, travel the world on my own. I drive cars without adaptions in. I do all these things that I did before I was injured, because I've got this setup that works for me as an individual.